Hi there, and welcome to the Surviving and Thriving in Residency podcast. I'm Charley Lowry, your host and director of GME Relations at PracticeLink. This show is all about exploring the world of graduate and undergraduate medical education. We'll dive into the real-life experiences, successes, and challenges faced by medical students, residents, and fellows, while also highlighting valuable tools to support you, whether that's financial planning, student aid, or the many free resources provided by PracticeLink. If you're thinking about med school, currently studying, or deep into residency or fellowship, this podcast is here to offer insights and support to make your journey a bit easier than those before you. Today's guest is Dr. Ilya Seleznev, third-year resident at St. Mary's Hospital in St. Louis, Missouri. Thank you for joining us today. It's good to see you again. How are things going?
Thank you for having me, Charlie. Things are going great. I have a little over 3 months left in the residency, and I'm very excited for it to be over.
Yeah, it's been a long journey. And I would just like to talk to you today. We have met before. We've talked quite a bit over the last year, and I think your journey is a little bit different than most folks. So I would just like to talk a little bit about that today, but maybe kicking it off with what made you decide to become a physician? And at what point in your life did you make this decision?
My story dates back to high school. I'm thankful to my high school teacher who was there to inspire me to grow and make the right choices. I grew up in a small town in Kazakhstan called Stepnogorsk. It used to be a closed town because it had a sort of negative history of having a biological weapon facility. So it was in Soviet Union. Before I was born in Soviet Union times, it was a closed town/city. It was probably on the borderline in terms of size. So you grew up in that environment knowing that there was something out there on the outskirts of the town that was closed. Once the Soviet Union collapsed, lots of people lost their jobs to the changes. And the town I was growing up was actually a very nice town itself. The high school, elementary school, it was a happy place for me. I grew up in the family of business people. My mother and father, by the time of my teenage years, they were already in business. And I was thinking of doing the same thing, kind of following their footsteps. Obviously, you have your role models in your life, and you make certain choices based on that. But as I was growing up, my high school teacher, he was my homeroom teacher, but he was also teaching biology in our school. I was lucky enough to have him around because he was one of the best teachers really in the country. He won multiple awards for teaching, and he was the person to inspire people. And one day he invited me to join the biology club and study for biology and Olympiad, biology projects, and I got involved in that, and that really kind of turned my head away from the path of my parents. And I started learning more and more about biology and human physiology and biological processes. And that's where I remember myself actually changing my mind significantly about what I want to do in the future. My another passion was actually learning English. I was again lucky enough to travel a lot with my parents internationally, and I got interested in English and was pretty successful learning that while in high school as well. And, my dream was to join both of the paths of a physician and somebody who speaks English.
So how did you go from Kazakhstan to Purdue? How did all of that come about?
The first time I came to the U.S. was as an exchange student. I traveled to Oregon, where I did an exchange student high school year in a small town of Paisley. It was a lovely American family who was hosting multiple kids from different countries, getting a lot of international exposure at that time. There were 13 kids from different countries. None of them were from the same country. So we were all living in a little dormitory together with host parents. And it was my first exposure to American culture, to the country itself. Spent a year there. That's where most of my English came from as a learner. I was thinking about college at that time. I was initially planning to go back home and do college there, but while living here and learning more about culture, I decided to stay and pursue career in medicine back in high school. There were a few choices I had in front of me. I was thinking about initially of career over nurse. That was my first semester. I actually started with the University of Arkansas. It's University of Central Arkansas in Conway, Arkansas, where I did my first semester as a bachelor's of nursing. As I went from there, I realized that I didn't mind studying and thinking ahead of time. I thought I would be okay actually studying longer than just 4 years. And I remember I spoke with the chemistry professor and I asked him what would be the best way to try to get into medical school. And he advised me to look into biochemistry. That was a popular specialty at that time. It was back in 2008. That's when I changed my major and preparing for medical school. As a lot of people have, I had certain obstacles. One of them was my parents at that time experienced some financial difficulties. I was no longer able to afford going to college in the US. It was a big turn for me. That's when I started looking around and looking into scholarships. And that's the point when I went from Arkansas to Indiana to study at Purdue after getting scholarships from Kazakhstan to study biochemistry.
So you had a good experience at Purdue.
It was a great experience. It's a great school in terms of education, big school, a lot of exposure to great research science, especially chemistry at that time. Engineering is big at Purdue. A lot of my friends there were engineering majors, but I had a few friends in biology and chemistry as well. Long 4 years for me. Along the way in 4 years, I met my wife and we got married in the middle of my education in college years. And as I was going through Purdue, I remember I visited a little seminar for Indiana University School of Medicine and spoke with people from the representatives from the school. And then again, at that point, I realized I was a good fit, but again, I probably couldn't afford to do education here in the US. And as I was on scholarships at Purdue, and I focused on research. It was, I think, the first year when I visited that seminar and I realized I could, that my dream might not go exactly I wanted to go. And I started focusing on research and I applied to multiple labs and I got into a lab studying protein biology, the lab of Bill Kramer, where I spent 1.5 years doing research about membrane proteins.
And then so you finished up Purdue and you decided to go home for medical school, right?
Yes, it was my last year of school at Purdue. I wasn't leaving for home in the summers since my family was here. And I kept doing research and I was focusing on trying to get into a doctorate program in biology when I received a letter from a newly established medical school in Kazakhstan. And they knew that I was studying at Purdue, and the prerequisites were very similar to the education in the United States, where you do a regular path of doing a bachelor's degree and then applying for medical school for a 3 or 4 year program, depending what school you're applying to. And they established in Kazakhstan a medical school called Nazarbayev University School of Medicine. And they were recruiting the first batch of medical students for the school, and not a lot of people qualified in terms of educational background. They did require you to have an MCAT exam, medical college admission testing, which again for me was completely new. It was this summer of, I want to say, of 2014. And I had to learn all about it. And in the span of one semester in medical school at Purdue while doing research and also teaching a protein biology lab, I started studying for MCAT overnight. Me and my wife, we already had a kid at that time, and I would get back from the lab at about 10 p.m., have dinner with them, spend some time, and then they would go to bed. I would sit down and study for MCAT because I knew I didn't have much time. The application process would start in the winter, and I would need to pass MCAT by that time. So in about 3, 4, maybe 5 months, I learned what the MCAT is, got all the study materials. Fortunately, my preparation and education at Purdue was very helpful in studying for the MCAT, for most of the scientific portions of the exam. And I was mostly ready for it. And I focused on the ones that I hadn't had much experience with. Critical thinking, one of them. It's a pretty tough one for newbies. I was able to pass it with the scores required, I think in 3 or 4 months, because I started studying in September when I decided I really wanted to apply to medical school. I was lucky enough, again, to get invited and be qualified and have all the exams on board.
Was this the main school that you applied to, or did you apply to other schools?
The way my education went at that time, I could only apply to programs that are similar to the US. Otherwise, my bachelor's degree at Purdue would be a waste, because all of the schools at the post-Soviet countries where the education is more or less similar, they do a 7-year program where you do your preclinicals, basic science classes, clinicals, as well as internship. It's pretty much embedded in the 7-year program, while education here in the US and the one I had in Kazakhstan was a 4 years of bachelor's degree and 4 years of medical school. So where it leads to is that my education was incompatible with most of the schools unless I wanted to start from the beginning, and I did not really want to do that. So I didn't apply anywhere else. As I said, I was only looking to schools that would offer scholarships. And education in English was something I wanted, and then that's where Nazarbayev University had. All of their classes were in English. All of the faculty were internationals from Europe, US, Great Britain. Some of them were from Australia, multiple countries. Again, very, very international community, very international staff.
Now, how is Nazarbayev doing now? They've been open over 10 years, I guess, now. So they're doing well, still going strong.
They're expanding all the programs there. They have multiple postdoctoral programs. They're still running the medical school. And I was the first graduating batch in 2019. It's 2025. So they already had 6 batches, I think, graduate. I'm still in touch with the graduates. I'm helping out some of the graduates to get into medical residency in the US. Some of them reached out. They have different interests. I have some of my colleagues, batchmates, who have applied and got into medical residency in the US and different places. The way our medical school is structured, they're partnered with the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine. And a lot of faculty would come to Kazakhstan and teach us. So I did my clinical rotation in neonatology at Pittsburgh Children's. At that time, I was interested in the neonatology, and I was lucky enough to get to do a rotation there.
So your medical school, what do you think were the biggest challenges? Looking back on it, what would be something that you would think might be the hardest thing, or any problems during medical school that you had?
Again, it's a long path. It goes by quickly. And keeping up with all the work, the workflow. My experience in medical school was good preparation for residency, because time management is important. Your classes don't wait for you to be done with, as opposed to Purdue, where even if you didn't do well in the class, you had opportunity to retake it. Here, it's a structured program where you have to complete one level in order to get to the second level. The first 2 years are preclinical years, just like in any medical school in the US. It's very intense. Education at Purdue was extremely helpful in getting my basics in to build on. But obviously, some of the classes I haven't anticipated to be as difficult. Lots of human physiology, anatomy was great. So those are the new subjects. In terms of educational component for becoming a physician, it's obviously the bedside manners. It's the bedside teaching. I came to realize that this is a completely different experience of apprenticeship. It's only introduction compared to residency, obviously. As a medical student, you don't get to do a whole lot. My education that I got there was very solid, where they tried to give you as much as possible of patient exposure. As a physician, you learn that your job is taking care of patients, and the only way to learn that is being around patients. So it's completely different. It's not sitting in the classroom, listening to a lecture, writing an exam, doing a presentation. It's completely different. You have a person in front of you that has a problem that you're tasked to solve, and approaching the problem, learning about the problem, learning about the people, while being compassionate, while being empathic, is a skill that you need to learn to be a good doctor, to do a good job. It's not enough to be smart. That's what you learn pretty quickly. There are a lot of smart people around, but taking care of the patient and communicating with the patient is completely different. So I think it was probably the biggest challenge, how to learn that. But I enjoyed learning it.
Physicians, are you looking for the right practice in the perfect community? We can help. Schedule a quick free call with a PracticeLink physician relations specialist today. We'll connect you with recruiters and help guide you toward the job and place of your dreams. Visit PracticeLink.com for more information.
What I hear as a common response is study habits. Most people in their undergraduate don't learn the study habits that they need for medical school. So most medical students, when they start their first year, they have to learn all new study habits because things are so different. So it sounds like at Purdue, you received the study habits that you needed to be successful in medical school.
Yes, and then I remember coming back home. I spoke with my father. I got to spend a lot of time with him now that I was closer. And advice my dad gave me is whatever you do is do a little bit more. You're required to study certain things for an exam, do a little bit more. You need to do research, do a little bit more. You are exposed to the patients, do a little bit more. Spend a little bit more time. Talk to them a little bit longer. And I think it was very simple advice from somebody who's never done medicine, but it had essential component of growth. And the same thing for my classes. The study habits, you're right. The study habits, I kept them, and intensity of the study is a lot of time in the library. I didn't study much at home because we had a child at home. It was very difficult at the times to study at home. So I would actually take my daughter sometimes after daycare to the library with me, and she liked cafeteria food. She still remembers it. She's 12 now.
So your clinical years, how did the clinical years in med school go?
When you transition to your clinical years, you realize now that all of your time you spend is in front of the patient, and you need to think as you go. And that's very difficult. It's very difficult, as you realize. Being humble with the patient when you don't know things is important. Providing them with information you know and you don't know as well. You feel that you're very slow. You see attending physicians taking care of 10, 20 patients, and you don't know how to do that when you're only learning to speak and to come up with your assessment plan for one patient. So it was quite interesting. And as a medical student, you were exposed to so many different fields of medicine, starting with neonatology, ending with geriatrics, surgery, obstetrics, and gynecology. And they're very different as you learn and you go through rotations. And our rotations were anywhere between 1 to 2 months. And by the end of the month, you only start to get comfortable with patients in that field, and then you switch to another subject that is completely different. That's where you need to be flexible enough to transition to a different specialty. Some of the specialties you like, some specialties you don't. And with core specialties that you need to do, again, OBGYN, surgery, internal medicine, pediatrics, those are quite different. And approach to patients, patient family is quite different. In the surgery, you'd spend a lot of time in the OR. The patient is on operating table and under anesthesia. You do your job to prepare for the surgery, talk to them after the surgery. So it's quite different.
What was your favorite rotation?
I enjoyed all of them. I'm flexible enough to enjoy the specialties I don't enjoy in particular and try to get as much as possible out of it. One of the things I remember is that I tried to work hard, no matter what specialty I was in. I did not know what I wanted to do after residency when I started my clinical years. And that's another direction you have to keep your eye on, because you need to decide what you want to do after medical school, and you have to commit. And having clinical years is very helpful because you learn the environment and the type of work you want to do. I told you I did neonatology rotation at Pittsburgh because at some point in my first year of clinical years, I decided that I am considering neonatology as a specialty. But then again, experience will tell you all, if you like it or not, if you want to commit or not. And I enjoyed it, but I knew this was not something I want to do for the rest of my life as a specialty. I realized that only going through that.
And the other plus, too, with the clinical years is getting to work with such a variety of physicians and such a variety of personalities. Everybody's different. It's a learning game all the way around.
It truly is. Again, in our medical school was based on several large academic centers in Kazakhstan that were taking care of the most advanced, most complex patients. And we had all throughout, we had younger medical school students, we had residents around, we had attendings around. They're all different. Even now in residency, you learn that every person is different. And part of the learning, again, is learning what kind of doctor you want to be. Not only what kind of specialty you want to do, what kind of doctor you want to be. The way I did it was looking at the attendings that had the qualities that I was inspired by. Just like my high school teacher, who was very committed to the teaching, very committed to the subject he was teaching. That's what I was looking for in my attendings, no matter what specialty it was: dedication to the patient, commitment to the patient, excellence in teaching and learning. Those are the things you pick up as you get your clinical years, and you pretty much build yourself by examples of people you work with. You absorb certain qualities, and those qualities better be good ones.
It helps. It definitely helps. Yeah. You finish medical school and you land in St. Louis at St. Mary's Residency. Tell me about that process. How did you end up in St. Louis?
There was actually a gap between my graduation and me beginning my medical school. My wife started her school. She took her turn to do her school. So I traveled back to the U.S. with her, and she actually went to the school in Arkansas that I attended as a bachelor nurse. When I started my education, being an international medical graduate, you are required to take board examinations just like any other American graduate, and you can only do it after graduation. Most of the times, unless you're possibly doing a Caribbean school, you are not able to take any of these steps until you have your graduate diploma. In order to obtain ECFMG certification, it's the certificate that will allow you to apply to residency in the United States. We had some obstacles. At that time, COVID pandemic just started, and that changed a lot for a lot of people. And one is that a lot of people around were sick and everybody was isolating. So one of the consequences was everything went distance, and nobody knew how to do residency application in that setting. Obviously, everybody was learning how to go around this. And in order to take an examination, you need to be in a place with other people around you. And USMLE, as medical licensing examinations, is usually done at the centers where multiple people take it at the same time. So they took their time to figure out how to do it the right way and the safe way. And I was unable to do a clinical examination and was 1 year behind because of that. And when my USMLE CS, or clinical exam, was canceled because of the changes in process, and they put me behind 1 year. But there are always good things that come out of it, and I was able to do a little bit more clinical rotations while in Arkansas, and that gave me great exposure to the U.S. medical system and how things work at the primary care level and the hospital as well. So it was a rather positive experience for me. After USMLE underwent some changes, I was able to take and complete all of the exams to apply to residency. And residency application is a whole another process, a whole another level of stress.
How many programs did you apply to?
Oh, it was the first year that, if I'm correct, the organization where you apply through, they offered online application, and all of the interviews went online as well. Back in the days, they used to do in-person interviews, which for me is something unknown, unheard of, now that we're in post-pandemic period. I applied to, I can't remember exact number, but I remember it was over 100 programs where I applied to. It was very broad. A lot of people approach it in different ways, but I got to learn, again, it's just like research. You sit down and learn about every program, and you have to individualize your application for many of them. And it's a good thing to have a focus on a set number of programs, but being international medical graduate, the odds are stacked against you. So you have to think and be open to applying to places that you've never heard about. And St. Louis was actually one of them for me. I liked the city, and I looked into programs here and applied here as well. But there was obviously a set of programs that I was focused on. Beyond that, there were about 50 programs I really wanted to apply to.
A lot of time and effort and cost involved in all that application process, right? A lot of cost.
Definitely. Having personal connection, meaning that you know what the program is, who the people in the program are, how they are run, is always helpful. For many American and Caribbean graduates, Caribbean school graduates, they do get to do their clinicals here. And by doing clinical courses here in the U.S., you get exposed to, one, how the U.S. system works, Two, you get to know people. You get to work with physicians, attending physicians. And again, just like clinical learning in the medical school, you learn what the environment is where you want to work. And by doing that, you focus on certain programs that feel like home for you.
And I think a lot of those programs observe those folks. If they know they're interested in coming to that program, even if they're just there for a core clerkship, they observe them, right? And they're watching them. And if they know they're interested, that's definitely an advantage that you did not have. You couldn't come in and do your third-year rotation in medical school at a facility that you were interested in applying to, so they would get to know you. You had to come in completely unknown.
Definitely. Your resume is only one side to you, really. The only way to observe your personal qualities is through work, your work ethic, your bedside manners. Those are important things. And after working with medical students, I got to know all of that. But then I did not know. And the only way for me to get to know the program at that time was in the interview. When you approach your interviews during medical residency application, you really have to try through the interview, which is extremely difficult online, to tell you that. In person is much more simple than that, but you have to do your best to learn who the people running the program, who are the people studying in the program, how is the environment in this specific residency program. If you don't get along online, there's not a whole lot of chances that you will get along in person. It's only the surface of an iceberg. On the other end, you have to think of the programs themselves. What they're trying to do is they try to learn what kind of person you are. Somebody who they observed and know would be the first choice for them, for sure.
I feel like St. Mary's really does a good job of that. I think that they really do look for the right fit when they're looking for residents.
Exactly. I had 8 interviews, and while going through interviews, if the program does a good job putting you through enough people who will give you the information you want to learn about the program, you will remember the interviews that went well. That feeling of belonging, feeling that this is the place where you would fit, is at the level of intuition, I would say. You have to listen to it. I'm glad I did, because even through the online conversation, just like you and I are talking right now, I learned that this was the place where I would fit. Obviously, you rank the programs. You don't sign the contract in the interview. You rank the programs from the ones you like the most, from the programs you like least. And I was lucky enough to be ranked high with my program.
Your first year at St. Louis, how was that? What were the obstacles you felt like you faced in your first year? It's good you had your wife and children with you, because a lot of feedback we get is first year residency is very lonely for a lot of people. They're away from family. They're on their own. They're working a ton of hours, eating when they can eat and going home and sleeping. So, very lonely time. But how was your first year? What were some of the obstacles you felt like you had?
I remember I was watching the news during the pandemic, and Dr. Anthony Fauci was one of the leading COVID responses. He said that COVID was reminding him of his residency year. And he's a brilliant doctor. Some of the books I read were apparently written in collaboration with him. And I was surprised that he was an extremely smart person, very nice person, that even him was impressed by his residency experience, and he would never want to go back to residency, but he did during the pandemic. It was a big heads up for me. When I got into residency, I always thought of myself as a hard-working person, spending a lot of hours studying and working to become a physician. But I realized that even that was not enough. It was a pretty shocking experience where you come into work every day and you realize that there is a certain amount of work you have to do in your day, and you only have about 12 to 13 hours to do that. And it's every day and it never stops. And you have to get into habit of managing your time. Again, putting time away to sleep and eat. But then again, it also tells you a lot about you as a person. It teaches you a lot. You have to approach it with the mind that things will get better. As you build the basics, and those basics are very difficult to build. You learn by experience most of the time. Your days of sitting behind your computer, sitting behind your textbook are over. And now all you have is all the work in front of you. You have patients that you have to take care of. You have your team to communicate with. All of this you have to do quickly and efficiently, diligently. And that's stressing on mind and body as well. I learned that only going through that.
So what did you do for fun? How did you manage that? How did you step away from it?
As you said, my family was with me and they were my buffer, my decompression. Funny enough, when I would get home, a lot of times I would still work, finishing things I needed to do. And everybody tells you don't bring your work home. But then again, I would never get home sometimes if I wouldn't bring work, especially in the first year. And that's okay. Things get better. All I tell interns when they come in, that things will get better. No matter how bad they are right now, they will get better. That's the only direction you're going to advance. But then when I got home, just being around family, setting your mind off of stress and then environment you were in the whole day was always helpful. My wife was very heavy on me on actually focusing on home, on yourself when I get home. They always gave me time to rest. She was always understanding of what I'm going through. She would listen to me, offer advices sometimes, how to get things more efficient and rest when you get home, rest again.
That's great. How was the resident culture? Did you guys socialize any after work, or was there group activities, things like that during the year?
Yes, with your batchmates, you'll obviously make friends with certain residents more than you do with others. You hang out with them. The way our residency program is structured, you have your teams on the floors, internal medicine floors. You have your teams in the clinic where you get your outpatient experience. And your environment always shifts. There's barely ever the same person you work with. There were residents that I'm in the same batch, but I never worked with them personally. We were never on the same team. And it was always hard to get together because there's always somebody working. The hospital never stops. The hospital never shuts down. The hospital doesn't have weekends as other professions see it. Saturday and Sunday is still a work day. But even then, we would get together in the restaurants. Our residency worked hard to make sure that when we get together, we spend some quality time. We always had a resident day when all of the residents would be off. That was probably the only day when all of the residents were off together. And that's where we would get to know each other more. We would get to know each other's families as well. When you get into residency by that time, you usually get older too. And a lot of residents by that time already have kids, just like myself. Some of the friends you make in residency are friends for your life, just like I did at Purdue and other schools that I went to. I'm still friends with the same people.
At PracticeLink, we believe your physician job search should be simple, supportive, and stress-free. That's why creating an account has always been, and will always be, completely free for physicians. Create your free account today at PracticeLink.com to start receiving your latest and most exclusive job opportunities directly to your inbox.
So tell me, will you be a preceptor? Will you be taking medical students when you start working? Is that part of your plan?
Yes, staying behind as a hospitalist. I will be academic hospitalist. All the hospitals at St. Mary's right now are academic hospitalist. And typical team, just to give you an example, on the floor rotation consists of an attending physician, 1 to 3 medical residents depending on the day, usually 1 senior resident and 1 to 2 first-year residents. And then medical students would have quite a bit of physician assistants, PA students as well. And they carry their own patients. It's a great environment, especially when you start as an international medical graduate. Usually American medical students are, especially the 4th-year medical students that have gone through a good number of their core rotations and specialty rotations, they're usually prepared to begin the residency. You see how they work and see how other residents work as well. You adapt and develop your style of work and your workflow. And that's what mainly you build in your first year.
So your next step, you're planning to stay in St. Louis for a while, right? You finish up this summer, so you're hoping to stay in the area.
Yes, when I was choosing the place where I wanted to do a residency, I was consulting my wife a lot. When you go for residency, you bring your family with you, and it was an important step for us. I did apply to programs in Arkansas because we were living in Arkansas at that time. You take into account a lot of things. For us was the size of the city, because we have had kids by that time. We had our second child while she was in the school. And you take that into account. We also took into account the weather. Arkansas was a little too hot for us. Coming from a very cold country, our capital, where my medical school is, the second coldest capital in the world. But it was a little too cold for us. We liked St. Louis for many of the qualities the city have. First thing is simple size. It's a bigger city. But then again, we didn't favor large cities like Chicago, New York. We never looked into living there. And living here, we like the culture. Just like with your work environment, your residency environment, you get to choose what kind of people you want to be around. As I tell a lot of people, after living here 1 year, it felt like home. It still does for us. And our choice when choosing a place for further employment as a hospitalist, take into account the same things, the environment, the people around you.
Yeah, and you're centrally located. You're close to a great airport. St. Louis has a great airport and easy to get around, and a lot of interstates there in St. Louis to get you wherever you need to go. So pretty easy as far as the city goes, and anything you would want is there. So it's a good spot, I think. Definitely a good spot.
Yeah, I agree on that. We do a lot of outdoor activities with my family. My dad visits a lot and we fish a lot. I probably told you about fishing in Missouri and Arkansas and even in Florida that my dad and I did. One of the interesting things we do is fishing for sturgeon here, and where you can get black caviar. And Mississippi is one of the locations in the United States where you can do that. Again, thanks to my dad to discover that.
What about fellowship? Did you think about fellowship, or what's your thoughts on that?
Yes. The first thing for me after medical school was decide what kind of specialty I want to get into. And by the end of medical school, I had no doubt that the internal medicine was the right fit for me. It was the people that I would take care of were adults as opposed to children with experience in neonatology and pediatrics. And the broadness of the specialty itself. And as a hospitalist, you take care of different pathologies, including surgical. People don't just come in with one thing. And I really enjoyed that. You get to learn a lot. You get exposed to different specialties, still like medical student. I enjoyed that experience. I had no doubt about what I want to do after I graduate from residency. Internal medicine is universal choice for me, as it has all the qualities in it that I enjoy the most. When you get to choose between inpatient versus outpatient experience as a medical resident, again, your qualities, the environment you like to work in matters. You want to take it slow and have your time as an outpatient with your patients. You like office setting. People usually feel well in the primary care. There's no acuity in there. That's what I mean. I don't mean that they don't have any problems, but the acuity is different. And the hospital environment, where patients are generally sicker, is what I enjoyed the most. You need to be on your feet all day to act quickly. There's always an amount of work you have to complete by the end of the day, even as an attending. That's why I made the choice for hospitals as a specialty. But looking beyond that, to answer your question, I didn't know if I wanted to specialize when I came to residency. There were some specialties that I joined the most. Having background in biochemistry, I looked into hematology and oncology initially, and I was thinking that I would want to do that after residency. But as I went through residency, I realized that the setting that hematologists and oncologists in the United States is probably not fitting me exactly. And then I enjoyed learning about oncology a lot while going through my residency. But I was surprised to learn that about myself, that I enjoy cardiology a lot. I was not expecting that at all. And it was a revelation to myself that learning about the heart was, for me, brought me joy more than learning about other subjects. I'm still considering fellowship in cardiology as a specialty. I don't know yet if I would do interventional cardiology or not. That's still to be learned, even though I enjoy doing procedures a lot while in the ICU or while doing other specialties. I'm still thinking about it, because being international medical graduate, you have to take into account your legal status in the United States when you apply. For international medical graduate and international residents that graduate, everybody's situation is quite different. There are a lot of variables you have to account for when you make your choices that a lot of times can dictate your choice of specialty.
So for our listeners, whether they're international medical graduates, whether they're thinking about applying to medical school, maybe they're a resident, what words of wisdom do you have for them? What words of advice, looking back on everywhere you've been and all you've done and accomplished? Are there things you would tell them not to worry so much about? Are there things you would tell them to maybe put more emphasis on? Or any words of wisdom for anybody listening in the whole spectrum?
At the level of the medical student, I would say that's when you build your bedside manners. Going through your clinical years, try to spend as much time as possible with patients, developing qualities like empathy, compassion, ability to care, ability to be there. Skill connecting with the patients is very important. That will set you up for a great success in your residency. It'll make things a lot easier for you. Becoming a resident, don't forget those skills. Apply them. That's when you get to apply them every day, multiple times, whether you're in the clinic or on the floor rotation taking care of patients in the hospital. Use them every day. And as a medical resident, understand that there will be a better day. When you begin your intern year, you have to think back on when you have the worst day and know that there will be a better day later, maybe tomorrow, maybe the day after tomorrow, and try to enjoy it as much. You probably learn from your most difficult day the most. Try to enjoy it as much. It's hard to understand when there is so much work to do, how to enjoy it, but you went through so much to be there. Try to enjoy it as much.
I worked with medical students for so long, so many years, and everything is your biggest accomplishment and your biggest hurdle and your biggest stress in increments, So your biggest stress is getting into medical school to begin with, and it's so many emotions tied to it, and you get in, and then it's your first exam, and then it's your boards, and then you've got rotations. You're walking into a hospital and taking care of patients for the first time in medical school, and everything is a hurdle. But when you look back on the whole journey, it really goes quickly, I think, and I think you're right on. Try to enjoy it. I love your words of wisdom as far as do a little bit more each time, study a little bit more. All of those little bit mores add up to a whole lot.
It does, and it takes years. Generally, I approach it as a decade. By the time you're done with it, you're good half of your life you were pursuing the journey. And as you said, in 10 years, a little bit more adds up.
A little bit more adds up. And working in medicine, you never know what case is going to walk through the door where you're going to say, oh, I didn't have to study this, but I did. And I'm glad I did because I can diagnose you. You just never know. You never know. So good words of wisdom. I can't thank you enough for being on the show. I would love to have you back, talk about maybe some tips for landing that first job. Of course, with us here at PracticeLink, I get to work with residents every day and helping them find their first practice, and it's so rewarding, and we have a lot of great resources. So I'd love to have you back and talk about some of those things, and I wish you the best of luck. I'm sure I'll be seeing you in St. Louis.
Yes, thank you for having me. I enjoyed sharing my story and would be happy to be back.
If there's anything we can do to help you out, let us know. Please give my regards to your wife and tell her I hope to see her soon.